So that should be us. Okay, and we'll just get started. Right. Okay. Right. So this section is all about, or this phase, next phase is all about adaptability. So you'll notice that we've been kind of moving our way around the business model canvas in terms of how we've kind of been going with the program delivery so far. So we can't really miss out adaptability as a core piece of your business, because if anything has taught us in the past 5 years, there's a real need with things like the global pandemic and whatnot to be able to explore this concept of adaptability and how can we actually fuse this into more of our everyday lives. Now, I'm not the biggest Darwin fan. I didn't support all his theories, but certainly one of his most famous quotes is "this species," or something along the lines of "the species that's most likely to survive is the one that can adapt." So something along those lines. So that really pertains to your business as well, especially in these days when competition is so rife and whatnot. How can you actually adapt and approach your business with that adaptive sort of mindset? So we're going to be exploring that today. So how we're going to do that, we're going to consider a range of scenarios which might impact your business. And Candace is going to be taking us through that as well. Okay, that's still people arriving, that's fine. We're going to reflect on the impact piece of your business as well. So it's not just things like, how much money are you making that people want to hear about? Especially these days, people are actually more conscientious and more critical, if you will, in sense, to be honest, of things like your impact piece. What change are you bringing to the world with your business? Not all about cash flow, not all about great massive turnover. That's great, but what sort of impact and what butterfly effect are you creating to make the lives of people around you better through your business? That score is really high as well. And you'll find sometimes investors, that's potentially what they're looking for. Actually, they're not looking for a massive financial return. They're looking for for an impact piece as well. Then we'll go into the impact goals that you want to set for your business. Obviously, it's the sort of thing that you want to set out from the outset. You don't sort of just want to feel your way and say, oh, we'll just see how we get on and, see how we get on with the adaptability impact piece. That's often a recipe for disaster. And we'll be exploring that a little bit later on with some case studies as well. And then we'll also be looking at the pitch. So some of you contacted me already about things like the mentor mashup. That's great. We'll be touching on that very lightly today, and we're going to in more detail this week, don't worry. But also thinking at your semi-final pitching and the mentor mashup as well. Okay. So in terms of just a quick recap of where we've been so far or what we've covered, because like I say, it's been 2 weeks, but it feels like it's been a wee while since our last session. We covered the feasibility. Okay, so that was phase 2 of the Accelerator program. And you'll probably see in my the emails, just encouraging you to go ahead and submit the milestone evidence. Don't worry if you haven't done it just yet today. You do have till the end of this week. And what we were looking for there, as we were saying in our last session, is just a brief summary of the feasibility that we explored in the last phase in phase 2. And your mentor can help you with that as well. Okay. So as I was saying earlier, if you are struggling with submissions as well, I did try and include that in the email to you to make it nice and easy. So where do you submit your milestone evidence for phase 2? This is a wee snapshot of the link or the screen you need to go to in Teams. And you can see it just here on the left. So there's submit milestone evidence phase 1. And then you go down to phase 2, feasibility and whatnot. And then right at the bottom there, submit milestone evidence phase for phase 2. Okay, so that would take you to the link. And it's also in the email I sent earlier today as well. So lots of ways to get to that for submission. All right. Okay, so introducing adaptability, which is, like I say, is phase 3. So we're we're moving around the business model canvas. Like I said to you at the start of this program, really our model or our program or a guide for this, the Accelerator program is a business model canvas. We're kind of working our way. We started off in desirability, and we also touched on the vision, the value proposition in the middle, the boot camp especially. And then we got you to think about things like feasibility and whatnot with your key resources in the last phase as well. So adaptability kind of is I would say it touches on all of these, to be honest, because if you're looking at things like your customer segments and your customer relationships, are you going to stick with that same customer segment, for the whole business lifetime or life cycle? These are things you need to explore, and you probably need to explore it right from the outset as you're planning. Your key activities, they're probably going to be subject to change as well. They're probably going to have to be adaptable as well. So have a little think about how you can actually bringing this adaptability theory or concept into all the sections of the business model canvas. Even in your key costings as well, you might need to adapt things like the pandemic, you know, where we saw maybe not so much the pandemic actually, but with the Ukraine war, when we saw the petrol go up in price, that was a massive adaptation that the oil companies did now. You know, I'm by no means, you know, in support of all that, but that was an example of, you know, subject to market forces and different things, you'll need to adapt and you need to set out a new strategy to cope with your environmental factors because things have changed. Okay. So adaptability. What is adaptability? In a sense, it's more than just coping. It's more than just surviving. It's actually evolving, which is why I was referencing Darwin earlier. Um, it's your capacity or your resilience of people and systems to engage in problem-defining solving work during adaptive pressures and resulting disequilibrium, dealing with factors like uncertainty and disturbance. So we're seeing more and more of that these days. The world is changing. It's really accelerated in terms of things like AI is making things really different these days for people, for example. So how can you adapt to that to use these resources and maybe bring into your own business as well? So in terms of what an adaptive culture looks like, it's not really shying away from the elephants in the room. It's actually kind of calling them out and saying, okay, these are the elephants in the room. We need to actually deal with them. We actually need to confront them to a certain degree and honor them and see how we can actually confront is maybe a too negative word actually, but we need to actually acknowledge them. We need to honor them and we need to know how can we work with them. Okay. Often you'll find with adaptive culture, and this is maybe something you want to think about for your own business. What sort of culture do you want for your business? Do you want the responsibility of the organization to be shared? Is it just going to be you making all the decisions and that's it? Is there any sort of autonomy you want to empower your employees if you're building a team, for example? All these things really need to be set out. They need to be set out from the outset and they need to be clearly communicated in your business as well, because that's how you're then going to attract people to come and work with you as well. If you're looking for people that have an autonomous mindset and want to work autonomously, then you communicating that really clearly and making that part of your business strategy and structure will serve you really well. Okay. Typically also with adaptive culture, we'll see independent judgment is exercised. We'll see leadership's adaptive capacity is also developed. And there's also this constant process of reflection and continuous learning. And that's really very much institutionalized. So they're not just add-ons and they're not just incidentals. They're very much part of, we have an active in KPI, if you will, that involves reflection or feedback and insights. And this is maybe something to explore actually with your transformational coach. Those of you that are maybe meeting with Judith, you maybe want to start exploring some of these concepts as well. You know, what sort of leadership style or what sort of business culture do you want to have for your business, and making that really clear also. So typically we'll find there's a lot of distress to a certain degree going on these days. So almost in a way that actually that's the one constant. You know, change is the one constant, and distress, some would argue, is a constant these days. So how then do you live with that? How then do you evolve with that and learn to actually not shy away from it, but learn how to embrace it in a sense, if you will? Okay. In terms of the principles of adaptive leadership, typically these are the main principles. It's an adaptability or an ability to navigate uncertainty and change. It's awareness of self and others. So that piece, which is why I was speaking about the transformational coach being really so important this year, actually, because she can really help you plug into yourself and your self-reflection piece. And then utilizing organizational dynamics as well. So what sort of organizational dynamics are on the go do you want to have for the next 3 to 5 years or even beyond, you know? And there's also this, there's also something in change. There's also something in people say, well, this is the way we've always done things. And so this is the way it always has to be. Not necessarily, especially when you're trying to be an adaptive leader. Actually, it's kind of going to the brainstorming sessions and actually kind of back to the drawing board in your approach of leadership. So in terms of how it started, adaptive leadership, these are the sort of the forefathers, if you will. Leadership, these are easy answers. I mean, I don't know if that's something anyone's actually reflected on. Have you actually sat down and thought about, right, I want to start my own business as a startup, and that could be a charity, that could be a limited company, that could be, you know, something else, social enterprise. Have you actually sat down and thought about what type of leader do I want to be? And, you know, interestingly enough, people sometimes don't think they're leaders. You know, if I was to say who's a leader, you know, what would you say? And you maybe go ahead in the chat box actually and just say, who is a leader to you? You know, what's the first thing that comes to mind if I say, can you name some leaders in your life or that you're aware of? You know, it'd be interesting to know what kind of people thought with regards to leadership as a concept. Um, More often than not, people won't put themselves, you know, they'll shy away from putting themselves down as leaders, when in actuality, if you are actually running a business and you're actually running an NGO or whatever it may be, you actually need to really sit down and think about what's my leadership style going to be and what are the ways I'm going to be relating to people in my organization and actually out with my organization as well. So this is an example of the quote here from Ronald. He was saying doctors know how to fix a broken body, but struggle to get their patients to change their bad habits. So it can be typically easier to fix the heart than to change the heart, right? Because that almost in a sense requires more sort of fundamental work. It requires you to reflect on things like your values. It requires you to think on your weak spots, for example, your bad habits sort of thing. And there's another quote here at the bottom from Barty. So if you appear dangerous to people when you question their values or habits or beliefs of a you can appear, sorry, dangerous to people when you question their values, beliefs, or habits of a lifetime. And you can place yourself on the line when you tell people what they need to hear rather than what they want to hear. But often if you're sort of stuck in that silo of an echo chamber and people are never telling you the truth, then the problem never actually gets fixed. So that's something to think about as well with regards to adaptive leadership. Okay, so these are some books if you want to explore this concept even further that we'd recommend in terms of exploring the concept of adaptive leadership. Oh, somebody put in the chat. Okay, sounds like a lot of politicians. Yes, yes. And she was saying a leader is a person who leads by example. Yeah, that's a really great, actually, I think that's a great definition of a leader. Yeah, actually, that's what she was saying. And I agree, actually. People think, oh, leaders are things like your, you know, your PMs, you know, prime minister or your Mark Zuckerbergs and things like that. But actually, we are all kind of leaders in a certain degree, to especially with our own lives for sure. And more so if you're actually wanting to run your own business, you have to really think about how do you want to move, so to speak. So have a think about this. You don't need to do this now, but just have a think about your potential role in situations. So if you're talking about reflecting on adaptive leadership, especially, think about a particular situation you're currently facing at work or at home. And what do you think the technical elements might be? What are the adaptive ones? So it might be that, you know, some people are struggling to get into campus, for example. So maybe the car is in for an MOT, right? Okay, so that's a situation that they might find themselves. And then what changes, or it might be something around conflict. It might be something around conflict with a colleague or maybe a team member. That might actually be a more interesting one to look at for your business, actually. So what changes would your teammates potentially like to see? Okay. And maybe think about it not just from their point of view, but from your point of view as well. And if you take a certain adaptive change or a different stance in this, what are the potential losses? So if you deviate from the way things have already been done or you've been doing them, more often than not, you're going to potentially lose something. So what are the losses and can you stomach that? And is it worth it? You know, you kind of, and we'll get into this a little bit with scenario planning with Candace, but you're kind of looking at the different scenarios that could be on the table, right? And that's okay. You know, people like to say, oh, the worst case scenario and all these things, but you actually need to be in the know. You actually need to be more informed. If you choose a particular course of action, okay, the ramifications of this might be so, so, and so, and those are the losses that may occur. Can I live with that? You know, so it might be that you have a team member that's maybe a little bit difficult, and you say to them, okay, do you know what, this isn't working for whatever reason. It might be that the team member needs to go on some sort of training course or something like that, or you both need to look at it a bit differently. What are the losses there? Potentially might need to take some money to invest in that training course, for example. Excuse me. So in terms of another situation you might think of, so this is a reference to working on the balcony. So one thing I find quite useful if you're dealing with a situation that's maybe high pressured or something to do with change, try and become objective and look at it like you were actually looking at it from the top of a balcony, looking down, right? So people are on the dance floor downstairs doing the dance, so to speak. That's a situation on the dance floor, and you're on the balcony looking down at what's happening. So you're then looking at things from a different perspective. Okay. So that's maybe something to think about when you're dealing with situations as well, trying to distance yourself or trying to emotionally remove yourself from that situation, from the balcony, so you can then make best moves or strategize how you're going to lay your best plan, so to speak. And there are any patterns in place? You know, that can be quite difficult to see as well. If you have any sort of normal habits that you deal with, could that be something that's maybe holding you back? This is just an example of, like I say, a situation that you may be struggling with. What are the patterns in place? What are you contributing to the situation as well? That can be really difficult. That can be so difficult to identify. It can be a bit of a superhero power, actually, to be objective and to see, okay, this is actually how I'm contributing to this situation, and how can I maybe shift a little to help the situation move along. And then also think about things like the values, belief, and anxieties of the people that you're trying to work with. So, you know, you can't just go in and say, rah, 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 this is how it's going to be, rah, 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 rah. You know, who are the people you're dealing with? What personalities are you dealing with? What age are you dealing with? What mindset are you dealing with? What education are you dealing with? What's a history? Did they maybe have a bad experience within the workplace? What are the anxieties they have? All this can be really, really insightful, especially if you are trying to make progress happen in a certain new way or of being. And then of course, knowing about your own values and beliefs can be really really powerful. So okay, so in terms of scenarios, I'm going to hand over to Candace. Candace, I think you're going to share your screen.
I
Is that
am
right?
indeed, if that's okay. So hopefully everybody can see this.
Yeah.
Just go back, there we go. Hopefully everyone can see the screen now. I'm just going to take it back a little step. Aisha has very kindly described how being a leader in a business and being adaptable in that position can be really helpful when it comes to managing the change that businesses can go through. And I'm just going to take it through a slightly different lens and talk about things from a more general perspective and look at why businesses need to be adaptable. So as Aisha mentioned, you've got your business model canvas, and you might be at a stage where you've got everything all sorted. You know what you're looking to do, you know who you need to work with, you know what you need, and you know where you're going with your business. But sudden changes can onset in society and in the world. And it's really about, how can we make sure our businesses survive and thrive when difficult circumstances or even good circumstances come upon us suddenly. So today, in the next few slides, we're going to have a look at that in a bit more detail. So, why businesses should be adaptable, reflecting on sudden change that we've all seen in our lives, and we'll come back to that in just a moment. And then we'll look at something called the triple bottom line approach. And that really brings in the element of sustainability. And you might be thinking, why are we thinking about sustainability when we're talking about adaptability? And I suppose it's because adaptability is the ability to change, but sustainability is the ability to continue to move on and grow. So both of them are quite closely related. And as we'll see in the next few slides, a few things that are happening in the world with the sustainability hat on can affect our business and how our business must adapt and change. So we'll have a look at that in a bit more detail as well. Also, Aisha mentioned that we're going to be looking at scenario planning for the future. So we're going to have some time in breakout rooms to have a little chat about, what we might do as a business, what we might decide to do if certain situations come upon us, and how we might react. And then last but not least, I think we're going to take it back to the future, looking forward and how we can set impact and have some good goals looking forward for our businesses. So a lot to look forward to. First of all, thinking about why we need to be adaptable. So I don't know how many people here, maybe we could have a show of hands. How many people here would class themselves as a millennial? The favorite term. So this is somebody that's born before 1995, born from the 1980s onwards. I'm one. Yeah, Colin, Aisha, Olivanga, a few of us. Okay, a few of us are millennials. And then the next generation is a Gen Zer or a Gen Z. So I don't know who here is a Gen Z or a Gen Zer. Few hands up, few more hands going up. Fantastic. Okay, great. So we've got a good mix of Gen Zers and millennials, and of course there are other generations that are represented in this group as well. But the reason I'm asking the question about Gen Zers and millennials is because, in terms of time, those that have been born in those periods of time have experienced what we call VUCA. So that is volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And really, what that is saying is that the world around us is being a whole crazy amount of events that have happened, events that can make us feel uncertain, things that can be quite complex, and there's lots of things happening that we've had to face. Some of you will know that you've seen in the news that there's been climate change issues, there's been terrorism that we've had in the last few years, there's been lots of wars, and all of these things create what we call the VUCA environment. So an environment that's quite volatile and changes quite suddenly. So as a business, it's really important to think about, how your business might be impacted should some of these things happen. So that's something to bear in mind as we go through this presentation. The other thing as well is having the competitive edge. So again, Aisha mentioned that as time goes on, there's lots of things happening, lots of new tech coming out, there's lots of people bringing out new things. So being adaptable can be really helpful in making sure that we can get ahead of the competition and hopefully grow our business even further. We also have global connectivity. So again, before this sort of meeting wouldn't have happened online, it would have happened in person. But now there's people potentially from all parts of the world that could join this call. And that's something that can help us with our businesses as well. So the competition from a global perspective is there. People can connect, people can now sell things other side of the world without too much of a problem. And AI and trends have also propelled this. So with all these things in mind, it's really important for us to be adaptable and look out for opportunities for our business to change and adapt so it can be sustainable, survive, and thrive for the future. With that in mind, I thought it might be a nice idea to think of an instance where something pretty big has happened that has made us all change. And of course, the biggest thing that's happened in recent years is the COVID-19 pandemic, which unfortunately all of us are very familiar with. So I thought it might be a nice idea to put us into maybe some breakout rooms, maybe of 2 or 3. And Aisha, I don't know if that's possible, if we could perhaps get into breakout rooms for this. But what I'd like you to think about is to think back to March 2020 to March 2021, so that full year. And that was when COVID-19 restrictions were pretty high. They were tough restrictions. Most of us across the world were at home. We couldn't go out to work in our normal setting unless we were unless we were important workers, key workers, primary workers. And it was a really difficult situation. So what I'd like you to think about is, how did restrictions at that point change the way businesses operated? Now, I know that not all of you lived in the UK during the pandemic, and you may have lived in different countries across the world, but the pandemic touched pretty much every country in the whole entire of the world. So each country will have been affected in some way. But again, what I'd like you to think about is how businesses were impacted. And for those of you that lived in the UK at the time, you might maybe bring to mind some of the hospitality businesses, some of the restrictions on certain types of business. But I'd like you to have a think about how they were impacted. So 5 minutes for this one. We'll bring you back at 6 o'clock, and then we'll see what everyone has to say.
Brilliant. And did you want 7 in each room, Candace, or is that too much? Or 4?
Preferably 3 or 4, if that's okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, you should be getting your invite to join. So if you could please accept, that'd be brilliant.
I think that's pretty much everyone back now. Welcome back. Okay, so I'm going to pick on a couple of rooms, if that's okay. And maybe somebody from the room might want to summarize a couple of things they discussed about. So again, the question was, what impact did the coronavirus over the period of time from March 2020 to March 2021 have on businesses? So I'm going to randomly pick, I'm going to pick room 3. So we had Cyril, we had Ojutuli, Shiva, Nayame. Sorry, I'm so sorry with pronouncing names. I am terrible.
That's fine.
I do apologize. I'm going to put my hands up, and it happens to mine all the time. So we feel the same pain. Who would like to share? Would you like to share what was discussed in that room?
Yeah, we kind of kicked off with saying, well, the way some businesses changed their operation was by, I guess, not operating. And that's somewhat related to their adaptability. Stores that were especially like footfall and foot traffic based, if they didn't move to some kind of digital platform, unfortunately, we were forced to no longer trade, essentially. We also touched a bit on the aspect of while it was like obviously a bad thing, it also drove innovation in some ways. I think there was a saying which was something to the effect of like trouble begets innovation or something like that. And there a lot of those changes that came about via COVID and like being forced essentially to have a digital front led to uh, changes that have stayed. I guess an example of that is like a QR code menu or something like that. And now it's like paper free, less paper waste and all that kind of stuff. And then lastly, we touched on like it was stressful and it was a period of like stretching in terms of was it Zoom, was it Teams, was it whatever it was, and social interaction had to change quite a lot because digital communication is very different from in-person communication. And Shiva was just ending on saying, because you don't know somebody's listening if you don't see their face or that kind of thing. So people have to change the way that like channels we use to communicate. But yeah, those are
Brilliant.
kind of the four things we touched on.
Thank you for that. And so what you're really saying is that there was a few different changes that had happened there. So some of them good, some of them really bad, some of them had stopped business altogether. So it's worth just thinking about the impacts that something like that has had on business, because these things could happen again in the future, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in scenario planning. I'm going to pick on room 4, Colin, Josh, and Ronnie. What did you discuss in your room about the COVID-19 pandemic?
So no surprises, I was speaking about food. So I said like with a lot of places having to move outside to get like restaurants and stuff had to go outside. So doing kind of app to table orders and obviously increasing the kind of service staff for moving things in and out, especially for bars and things. And another one was kind of coffee shops serving from the window rather than actually letting people come in was a big one. Yeah. And then Ronnie, you covered what the limits to what people could actually buy in the shops, like flour, toilet roll, all that sort of stuff.
We don't miss those days, do we?
No, it
The
was a fun
standing
time.
in it was a horrible time standing in the queues outside with face masks on, waiting to be served, being told you could only buy one packet of toilet roll. It was not a fun time. But what this time demonstrates is that businesses had to adapt, and they had to adapt, to be honest, in a really, really short period of time. Now, if you think about it, the pandemic, that the lockdown was in March, and some of these restrictions only started to lift later on in the summer, where certain businesses were then allowed to operate. So even the businesses that were eventually told they could operate had to even change their business model to allow them to operate in this new space. So lots of big and significant changes that all of us have seen. And this is something that is very valuable to take into our own business models, because it prepares us for times in future where things like that, hopefully not, but could happen again, and where we go and what we do with our business when those scenarios come upon us. So thank you very much for sharing that, group 3 and 4. That was really, really interesting you shared there. Going back to the business model canvas, this is our old friend. This has it all nicely set out. We've got our key partners, our value proposition, our customer segments, and our channels, all very good and well. But again, as we said, these things might need to change. We might need to think about different channels in which we deliver our products and services to our customers. We might need to even think about different customers that we start to work with. Now, an example of this is Brewdog. So, for example, in the pandemic, they obviously pre-pandemic were selling beer, alcohol. It was their main source of income. But in the pandemic, pubs, restaurants were on lockdown, and there were no customers from that perspective. So the only thing that they were really selling was through supermarkets where people were buying alcohol. But in that space, they decided to innovate. And as you all know, our favorite thing, which we won't go back to if we can avoid, was hand sanitizer. And that's something that they pivoted into. They decided to use the tools that they had to create hand sanitizer, something that was needed in the pandemic, that they could use, that they could make with the resources that they had to hand. So that's an example of how a business has innovated, but also adapted to the current situation and being able to survive through a difficult time by recognizing the opportunities that come with adaptation. Now we're going to think about your business in future. So I want you to imagine you've got your business all set up and everything is going great. But a few things start to crop up, and the question is, what are you going to do? So I'm going to show you this slide. Hopefully it will come through. Oh, there we go. Woo. All the way to the end. There we go. Planning for scenarios. There can be a best case scenario, a medium case scenario, and a worst case scenario for all of these things that I'm about to say. So what I want you to think about is what you might do, and think about what the best case scenario would be in this situation, what would be an okay situation, and what would be the worst case scenario for these different situations. So the first one is the core founder of your venture is offered their dream job for a significant amount of money. What do you do? Now, this could be applicable, especially if you are working in a pair, so you're co-founders and you're working together, but let's say so-and-so gets this amazing job, comes along, immense amount of money, and they are sorted for life. And you're left trying to run this business by yourself. So what do you do? So if we could get breakout rooms again, this time maybe for 5 minutes at the most, a couple of minutes, 5 minutes, and we'll bring you back. And we'll hopefully get to hear what you might do in this particular situation. And Rebecca, so thinking about the question around adaptability, core member of your team finds a dream job, what do you do? What did you guys discuss you might think about doing in that situation?
Sure. I'll go ahead quick, and then yeah, Edgy and Rebecca can jump in with whatever they think as well. We were talking a bit about kind of the process of giving the knowledge from the core founder out to the team kind of ahead of time, even to I suppose have a bit of a fail safe in the case that happens. So like not actually what we did talk about is having systems in place that the knowledge is there for the team if the core founder decides to leave. But I think also just in general, having a team that's well-rounded enough that everyone has a good scope of what the business is all about at its core, so that if the core founder was to jump ship, people do have that center of knowledge that they can continue things on. I think those are a couple of the main things we were talking about. I don't know if you guys had anything else you wanted to pitch in there too.
I think you capture it accurately. That's fine, Jeremy.
No, that's wonderful. I think you have all made really good points there. It's so important to have all the information in one place. And we all know what it's like, even if we've been working and a member of the team decides to move on or leaves for whatever reason, and we all have this massive panic about where all the files are. Are they on the shared drive? Can we find them? Does everyone know what's in that person's head? Can we transport it somewhere so that we can keep it forever? We all have those panics, don't we? But as you said, putting things in place to mitigate those issues are really, it can be really effective in ensuring that everybody is on the same page and everybody can kind of pick up from where that person has left off. So excellent, really good examples of how we might overcome that. Looking at room 2, we have Emmanuel, Georgina, Olubenga, and Wenfang. Any ideas on how you might look at that situation?
Okay, well, maybe I'll just quickly jump in. So I think for me personally, over the years, I've had experiences that are similar to that. All right, and there are 2 main words in the question: 1, core, and 2, founder. It was one of those that founded the company, not just head of IT. And core, meaning maybe his skill is, very pertinent to the startup. So we discussed about 3-4 things. Number 1 is reviewing the business case for the startup in the first place. All right, is it still viable? Do you want to do this? Do you want to continue or do you want to quit? Number 2 is talent. What skill are we losing when Fang talked about, hiring, all right, can we hire that kind of skill back? And there's something we also consider. This happened to us, and that is motivation. Because you can imagine 2, 3 founders, worked on a startup for a lot of years. One of them leaves. It could be hard for the rest to carry on, all right? Even if they can get the skill, because startup is tough, all right? And the support they give each other is one of the things that keeps them going. If a core founder leaves, you have to deal with the business case. Is it still valid? Should we push on? You have to deal with talent. How do we hire back? And then you might struggle with motivation for a while. But if you can overcome that, maybe you can push on. Okay, Emmanuel and Wenfang, Georgina, you want to chip in?
I think you captured it really well. It's just the thing that probably stood out a lot was the fact that it could hit motivation if a co-founder leaves for a dream job, because it makes you question, should I really be here in the first place?
Brilliant. Again, people are integral to your startup, to business. They have a major impact, and the decisions and the actions they take can have an impact on not only how you feel, but also how others in the business feel. And you have identified that. And again, it's thinking about ways that you can get around that. Can you hire someone in? Is there ways that you can motivate the team to keep going? Can you have a sit down with yourself and think about, well, how much of this have I put into it? And, how much of this can I keep going with? Reevaluating circumstances to be adaptable. But again, excellent things that you've looked at there, excellent considerations to make, that it does span across various different areas of the business, not just that one spot in particular. So well done, really good. One other one that I'd like to ask you to have a think about is this one. So see if I can share this to everybody. One of your employees or customers goes viral on TikTok, showing off what they do with your business. Your following expands by 30 times and you have 20 times the amount of orders. Can you cope? You've had all these new orders, tons more from the week before. What do you do? So this is, I suppose, a positive change potentially, but how do you manage this change? You've all of a sudden got this great sudden interest in your business and the customers are at the door wanting to buy from you. So what do you do? So again, 5 minutes in breakout rooms, maybe to discuss what this one, maybe Aisha, maybe just a little bit less actually, if that's okay. And we'll bring you back and we'll have another wee chat about this. Invest in your business, a bit more than you can manage. So group room 6, Jan and Sabina, how are you going to cope? What do you think?
So I'll start, and then Sabina can top up, I'm sure. But I think we're both from a software background or product, and I guess for us, we were like, great, we're delighted about this news because it's actually easier to scale. But we did recognize that if it was a products company, that you'll probably have to be honest and keep communication clear and open to make people aware of what your position is and how you're working to try and resolve it. But again, like even in the previous one, having a clear process or procedures there does help to actually plan for these type of ramp up or scale up that may be required.
Yeah, very well identified. And again, even software companies, I mean, we've all seen in the past when there's been a new product or a new piece of news released on a website and the website's crashed, and things like that can happen. So all businesses can be affected in some way with growth, but it's good to see that you're thinking of ways in which you could strategize to ensure that if you did have that growth, and that's something that you might be able to deal with going forward. So well done. Really good to hear that. And Sabina, did you have anything you wanted to add, or was that covered? No, all covered. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Room 5, we have Louis, Rory, and Shaji. So what are you going to do if your business goes viral?
Yeah, we discussed a few different things. We discussed how virality can kind of be temporary as well. So just hiring more staff might not be a good solution, but Shaji suggested kind of temporary staff like companies do around like seasonal holidays and things like this. Another aspect, depending on the business and the infrastructure and everything, you could also just post about it on your social media or your website that there might be some delays and kind of explain to customers, just adjust expectations. I don't think that there'll necessarily be a negative reaction to this if there is some small delay or so.
Fabulous. Again, just like room 6, just like what Jan said, being honest with your customers is really important, being upfront. You know, this is the situation we're in. It's great, but hey, we're struggling a little bit, but we'll try and do what we can to help you in the end. So absolutely recognizing that ability to change, that these things might happen and what you might do, what you might need to do to get around them. So fantastic. Well done. I think we've heard from all the rooms now, I think, hopefully, which means that we can move on to a little bit more to do with the environment. So you might be again wondering why I'm specifically focusing on the environment for this part of the session. And there is a very good reason for this. And this is really because as we've been speaking about adaptability and changing our business to meet different circumstances, one of the things that is really affecting businesses now more than ever is the change in environment that we're seeing in the natural world. So our climate, the pollution in the environment, our raw materials, resources. There's a huge, massive change, a lot in most cases, a negative impact that's been happening in the environment that's affecting the way in which we live our lives, but also the way in which we do business. So this is really to hone in on that and to kind of highlight some of the areas in which you as a business might consider going forward when it comes to handling the climate crisis or the environmental crisis that we're dealing with, but also ways in which you can reduce your impact as well on the environment. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we look at the impact section of the session. But just to give you a bit of an overview, this is a global temperature map that has been produced by the Met Office, and basically
you probably would have heard quite a lot in the news about this. We actually, climate change is a 1.5. We're all supposed to be kind of heading for with IPCC, I believe, in terms of the mark. But as we all saw or been seeing recently, that's really not been possible. We hosted a net zero masterclass last week. Oh, here we are. Candace's back. Great stuff. I was just explaining internet issues earlier.
Yeah, I don't know what's happening. I really hope that wasn't internet, but earlier on, both my phone signal and my internet, my home internet went off, and my husband's as well, and he's on a completely different network. So I'm hoping we're not having a blackout of some sort, but I am back for the meantime. So sorry, I will continue with what I was saying. There we go. Hopefully you can all see the screen now.
Yep.
So what I was saying was this graph has been produced by the Met Office, and essentially what it does is it shows you the increase in temperature that the world has experienced from when records began. So in 1850, you can see that the global sea and land temperatures were much lower than they are when we started to use much more of the current materials that we use, and fossil fuels and oil, etc. And we can see that temperatures have grown tremendously in a very relatively short period of time. So this has caused major concern, as many of you are well aware, across the world, and we are unfortunately seeing the negative impacts of this climate change and of the environment, the problems in the environment affecting lives, businesses, people across the globe. So it's something to take into consideration seriously when running your business. Thinking about the consequences that this then causes for businesses directly, or in general directly to all of us, are some of the obvious ones. So extreme weather changes. So many of you will have experienced times where we've had these horrible storms, really, really strong adverse storms, lots of really dry periods in the summer, and lots of rain. So there's been a huge change in our weather patterns and weather shifts that have a direct impact and consequence on all of us. We've also seen wildfires across Europe, across America, across Canada. They've been everywhere. They've been causing a lot of damage. Water scarcity as well, flooding, overheating, and also climate migration, where people are living in areas that the climate is essentially too harsh to live in now, and if they basically had to leave their homes and move to another part of the world so that they can live in a more reasonable climate and more reasonable conditions. So all of these things aren't particularly positive, and they do have a direct impact and consequence on our lives. but they also have an impact and consequence on our businesses. And some of the examples here that you can see are the direct impacts that can happen because of the climate. So for example, we have increased insurance costs. And that's really because things that happen, such as floods, for example, so the ones that we had in October down in Montrose, Aberdeenshire, the south part, many homes and businesses were flooded, sometimes for the first time, and very severely. And of course, these people have to claim on their insurance, because that's what you do in a situation like that. And of course, that puts the premium up. So that's an increased cost to these businesses that they have to now take on going forward. Also thinking about the designing of products and services that are offered. Sometimes they don't work anymore in certain climates. So, you know, there might be certain products that sit on the shelf at an ambient temperature that no longer can, because the ambient temperature is no longer suitable. You know, it's too hot or it's too harsh. So there's been actual changes that have been had to be made to certain products. Thinking as well about the supply chain, raw material shortages. So again, we've seen examples of this where there's been raw material shortages due to agricultural issues with the weather. So plants can't be grown, food can't be grown as it used to, and there's all these sorts of things that can have an impact on your supply chain. So again, thinking about how that might affect you. Also policy and regulation changes. So that's something that we've heard a lot about in the news recently. There was obviously a decision to bring in a net zero policy, which will mean that in several years' time, essentially combustion engines are not supposed to be made anymore. Whether that goes ahead, whether it doesn't, we don't know. But that's an example of a policy that might affect businesses going forward. And even in our local area, some of you might have heard of the low emission zone. I don't know if any of you have been driving around or walking around and seen that it's been drawn on the road, but essentially it means from later on this year that cars that were built or constructed before 2000, and I'm going to say 17, I think it's 2017, can no longer travel in the city in those areas. And for many businesses that rely on vans, or vehicles that have been built before that time, this is now causing a problem for them. They need to think of ways in which they can still continue to service their customers, but also manage the fines that they might actually receive by going into these areas. I actually had a friend who went down to Glasgow on holiday to get to an event, and just thought, you know what, I've got an old car, I'm going to go through the low emission zone, it'll be fine, I'll get fined, fine, just do it. And of course, he got fined going in and he got fined coming out. And when he went down to Glasgow Airport for his holidays in the summer, he couldn't use his card because he'd been banned. So it was quite a stark realization that, you know, these things have been put in place to protect the environment, and we have to essentially conform to them to ensure that we're meeting the requirements that they have. The other thing to think about is investor refocus. So there's been a lot of changes with investors, banks and certain other companies. Investors are looking to actively invest in companies that are sustainable or environmentally aware. They have portfolios that they want to build up to show that they are investing in cleaner technology or cleaner energies or cleaner businesses. So thinking about it from that perspective as well, that there's more opportunities for investment if you are going to think about the environment when it comes to your business. Also reputational risks. I mean, we all know, again, there's businesses that have been doing well for years, and then all of a sudden it starts to become a bit clearer on where they're getting the materials or how they're getting those materials, and that becomes a bit of a controversial thing. Again, that can have an impact on your reputation. You know, using single-use plastics, for example, can have a bad effect on your business. So again, some things to think about. And we also use these terms climate mitigation and climate adaptation. So when we talk about climate mitigation, that's really about reducing climate change. So what you can do as a business to ensure that, you know, what you're using is going to not affect the climate in a bad way, or at least lower the impact as much as possible. But on the flip side, we have climate adaptation, and that's kind of where this comes into, where essentially you look at ways in which your business adapts to the current situation that you're finding yourself in, and also the growing situation. So again, as time goes on, it's likely we're going to get more extreme weather. It's likely we're going to get issues with supply chain. So again, it's adapting. How can you adapt and change the way you do your business or the way you live your life along with to essentially work along with what's been happening, because there's certain things we're just not going to be able to stop, and it will be a case of adapting rather than mitigating in future. So another scenario for you. So again, we're poised for breakout rooms. Another 5 minutes for this one. So your supply chain is adversely affected due to extreme weather, meaning you cannot effectively continue to make your best seller. What do you do? Now, again, I know there are some service businesses here, and that might be a bit tricky, but think about that in the wider space. It might be servers you rely on, for example. It might be something else in a different country that's had some sort of flood, for example, and the servers have all gone out, whatever it might be. Think about something extreme that the weather has essentially impacted on and how that might affect your business. So 5 minutes, and I'll bring you back again to the main session and we'll discuss. Anaya May. So who would like to share?
I'll share, Candice. So my business is service provider. It's befriending service. And I'm thinking, well, okay, if we have this, bad weather kind of condition, adverse weather, what's going to be the worst scenario? The worst scenario might be the, not meeting with the boys and with the asylum seekers, for example, or our volunteers can't physically drive and go there because of the, maybe roads are closed and the rest of it. And then what we can do, we can say, well, okay, let's meet online. So have a meeting online. But again, what happens if we don't have the internet access? If because of the, the adverse weather, the internet is cut. So I'm thinking, well, I can't do anything. So nothing comes to my mind. Okay, you can physically kind of call them, but what happens if even the phones are not working? So that's the thing, because I've been in a scenario where I didn't have any internet, I didn't have any phone connections, and you're just sitting there thinking, how am I going to reach to these people? I mean, we're so reliant on internet connections and everything, but I mean, even if you put it in your policy to kind of mitigate the risk, when it happens, it happens. And I don't have any remedy. I don't have anything to kind of, yeah. So
thank you, Shiva. And you know what, that's exactly, it's an excellent point that you've made, that there's certain situations where you're just not always going to be able to find an alternative solution.
Yeah.
And it's recognizing that. And sometimes it's communicating that to your customers or to the people you're working with early on that, in this situation, we may not be able to provide this service, or we may not be able to do it in the way in which we have been doing it from this particular time before. And a perfect example of that was during the storms that we had in the last couple of years. So that especially those that lived out in Aberdeenshire, not only was their internet cut off, but their electricity and also their phone lines. Some of them that had electric cars had to abandon them in the middle of the road because there was no way of charging them or getting anywhere. So, severe conditions have taken place. And often in those situations, the biggest concern was, is how do we know if everyone's okay? So, people had to actually go to the locality and find out if people are okay and set up refuge centers. So these things happen. But as you said, there's not always something you can actually do. Sometimes it's a case of communicating beforehand that if this happens, this unfortunately might be the situation. So thank you for that and sharing your group with your group. Who else have we got? Let's have a look. If I'm going to pick on room 4, Colin, Josh, and Ronnie. What would you do if the weather adversely affects your business?
My bit is kind of hard to apply to what me and Sean are doing, but Colin sort of mentioned that he, would one sort of pre-plan ahead and have a stock available. Is that right, Colin?
Yes, I was saying if the event happened that say I didn't have a stock of books ready and it was kind of doing as demand, was going to say my printer had a flood and buggered all the printers and I couldn't print, I would see if I could print at a local printer, if I could outsource it to a different printer in the interim. But then if maybe the cost didn't work out or it was going to just not be viable to do so, I could alternatively send a digital copy of the book to everyone who's purchased in the interim with a nice tale of woe message to make them feel sorry for me and not come at me on social media, and then follow up with the book once we were in a position to do so again. Could be a nice, easy fix for the time being.
You know, we also explored the idea as well that maybe an alternative thing is, because we're going to recognise that flooding is going to happen more because of global warming, especially in North Scotland or the North East of Scotland. It might be worth exploring having, you know, where an option where people can just directly buy from the supplier. It might be more expensive in the interim for you personally. You're still making some profit at least, you know, and it's not disrupting service too much. So that's also a possibility worth exploring as well.
Brilliant. Again, thinking about all the different things that could happen, how that might affect your business. Again, this is great to hear because there's different businesses here that are represented. Some of the service businesses, it can be really tricky to work out, you know, well, how does this affect my business? How would this impact? But again, you know, we're seeing extreme weather and it's saying about impacting your bestseller, but for service businesses, that could be impacting the servers, that could be impacting, even if you're, you know, you're selling and sending stuff, or sending things that could impact data, could impact mail deliveries, for example, if you're selling products. So there's lots of things that could happen, but it's really good to see that you're demonstrating in both groups ways in which you might think about getting around that. Or if you can't, putting your hands up and being honest and going, look, this is something that this is out of our control. It's something that's happened that we can't control. But this is, you know, what we're going to try and do once things are back up and running or whatever it might be. So excellent. Both groups there have demonstrated that they have thought about that. And you've shown as well that in different situations that there might be different things that you can do. So thank you for that. Okay, so we're going to move on to creating impact, because we've discussed already you know, why adapting is important. So adaptability is important. We've also discussed specifically the impact the environment might have on our businesses, because that's something that we are very much dealing with right now and something we're going to continue to deal with. But if we flip things around a little bit more and look at things from a more positive perspective, we're going to look at creating impact and how we as businesses can actually create a good thing in our communities, but also just in general in society, how we can leave a good mark by our business operations. And one of the things to consider is the theory of the triple bottom line. So I might want to ask at this point for a show of hands, has anybody heard of this theory, the triple bottom line? And if you haven't, that's fine. No? Okay. All new. Excellent. Well, the triple bottom line basically means that you as a business not only consider profit, but you also consider the impact your business, the good impact your business can have on the planet and on people. And this is something that many social businesses, so social enterprises, will consider as part of their ethos. So they're not just existing for profit, but they're existing to make good impacts to the planet and to people around them. And it's important because it can help a business be sustainable from more than one respect. So not just sustainable from an economic perspective, but sustainable in the way that it deals with the planet. So it keeps the planet's resources going, or it doesn't take away from them, but also it supports people around them and kind of enriches and supports people's lives. So it's a really, really good model to consider for your business. In terms of sustainability, that term is often used, and most of us often think of you know, trees or the environment or nice sustainable materials. That's kind of the thing that comes into our head most of the time. But actually, the term sustainability means a whole lot more than that. And as you'll see on here, some of you might be familiar with this, but the word sustainability was defined by the UN some years ago, and it says, meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So we're not just talking about the planet here or plastic in our oceans and things like that. We're actually talking about a lot more. We're talking about people's lives. We're talking about financial repercussions as well to keep the economy moving, as well as society. And you'll see on this screen what we call the Sustainable Development Goals. So as you'll see, there's 17 of them on the screen here. And these are the goals that the UN have set out for essentially all countries, a little bit like a roadmap or a map of goals to reach across the board. So these are areas in which your business can choose to try and have a positive impact. So as we can see, number 13, some of you might be moving towards the climate route, but some of you also might be at number 1 with no poverty. Others might be gender equality, and others might be clean water and sanitation, and even sustainable cities and communities if you're working with smaller groups and partnerships. Again, all of these areas are ways in which you can create a sustainable impact. So it's worth thinking then how your business impacts different parts of society, different parts of the environment, the world, and of course the economy. And if you think about the different areas in which your business reaches out to, it impacts, it affects, that will give you a good idea, a good steer on whether you're creating a positive or a negative impact in any of those areas. Also to think about if you're creating a product, but this also goes for services as well, but mainly we talk about this when it comes to products because they're made from raw materials. It's really important to consider what you are using to make them. And the reason we talk about this is because as we know, we've seen many articles in the news, we've seen many programs about it, documentaries, that unfortunately we as humans create a lot of waste. And by waste, I mean plastic waste, contaminated waste, things that we use from daily objects end up in landfill and they don't really go anywhere, they just rot and then they cause issues for our environment and of course for the atmosphere around us. But thinking about that particular issue right at the beginning of your business can be really, really helpful going forward. You can create a greater impact for the good, because that will allow you to consider things like how long your product is in use for or how long it's in circulation for, how is it used, what it's made from, and when it's coming to its end of its life, could it be turned into something else? Could it be kept in its life as in its current form or in another type of use for as long as possible without it having to go into the bin, essentially. So thinking about the life cycle of your product, what you can do with it afterwards, how easy is it for somebody to use this item for something else or to be used by a different industry or organization? How can we keep the life of that one product going for as long as possible to reduce the amount of content that ends up on our landfill sites? So that's something to think about, especially if you're designing a product. Packaging as well. Think about what you're using, think about the paper you're using, think about the materials that are in your bottle, think about how that is impacting things overall over the product life cycle. And that's it from me. You've had a lot from me today. I think the next section is going to really be about how you might take the impact and take it into setting goals. So I'm going to pass back to Aisha to speak through that. But I have to just say it was really, really fun to spend some time with you. I know I haven't been around a lot and I do apologise for that, but I have really enjoyed this session and I hope you have too as well. So at this point, I will hand back to Aisha.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Candace. That was great. Thank you. I'm sure everybody got a chance to really think about, their piece with regards to sustainability and the climate, all these sort of things that maybe they hadn't thought about, especially with the scenario planning. So thank you so much for that. Okay, so I'm going to jump right into setting impact goals, and hopefully that's coming through. Is that coming through all right?
It is indeed.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so in terms of your impact goals, Candace sort of touched on this with regards to the sustainable development goals. That's one way that you can think about setting impact goals, for example. So as an organization, do you want to follow a framework such as the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals? There's 17 of them, as Candace shared on the slide. Or it might be something else as well. This is a quote from Einstein, and he's saying, not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. And I suppose that's in reference again to how we started off today's session, thinking about investors aren't always necessarily looking for a return, a finance, a figure, success. Success looks different to different people. And sometimes it's not all about the counts or the figures or the numbers, essentially. There's impact that you can create out with that monetary figure impact, if you will. So if you're looking for ways that you can kind of consider for your own business, the impact goals that you might want to maybe bring into your business, and you're really struggling, I would suggest certainly the 17 Sustainable Development Goals could be a good place to start. If you're not familiar with them, they're certainly something that we've been seeing more of around the university, around the council. So things are becoming more kind of top of the agenda, I suppose, in a lot of ways. And they can also actually be quite useful for thinking about solving the world's problems. Now, of course, nobody's suggesting that you go and solve all the world's problems, but it's maybe something to work towards. If there's a shared challenge, essentially, for example, life on land and sea, or gender equality, and then you can sort of work backwards to achieve that goal. That could be something that you then bring into your business, and then you can actually link it to the United Nations framework as well. Now, I know Georgiana is a big United Nations fan with regards to SDGs as well. So anybody can maybe, I'll give out, it's all right to give you a shout out, Georgiana, if anybody has any questions with the work you're doing there. I hope you don't mind me putting you on the spot. But I certainly know, for example, that's one of Georgiana's areas of interest and passions that she's plugged into. So with regards to the theory of change, introducing theory of change, it's essentially, if you have to lay out a framework that you're going to bring into your business of how you're going to achieve certain things and by when, essentially that's what the theory of change is. It can often be a visual.
It's not something that happens overnight, and it's something that you're going to have to consider if you're wanting to make an impact. So you might have an idea in your head that, yes, I'm going to meet this sustainable goal, and this is going to be our main area of impact, and you want it desperately to happen overnight, but that's not going to happen. It's something that's going to take some time for you to think about and to make slow changes over time. So we can see here we've got a list of things you might want to consider. So first thing that you might want to consider is what you need to put into it. So time, money, materials, and that's going to be a cost associated with that as well. What activities you might have to do to get to that point. So again, thinking about what your staff are doing, how much sales you might need to do, what projects you might need to engage in to actually meet that goal. And then thinking about what might come out of it from a short term. So what you might have to do, what things you might actually have to deliver, and who you might have to engage with as well. That's another one that you need to consider. And then thinking about more on a longer term, you want to ensure that what you do isn't just a short burst of activity, but something that's going to create a legacy within your business. So thinking about how the behavior of your organization might change going forward, and how you're going to measure change. That's a big one. You know, if you're making sustainability changes, it's great, but how are you actually going to measure, that change over time and what it's done? And that nicely leads on to impact. That way that you can think about, well, I've made all these changes over time, and I've made measurements to see where we are and where we are now. And now I can have a look at how to measure the impact. What difference have we made over time? But again, it's keeping focus, having that goal right up at the front, and that will help you in your planning along the way.
Yeah. Candace, I was just going to add to that as well that, if anybody is tendering for work, more and more now we're being asked, what our policies are with regards to sustainability and generally corporate social responsibility and so on. And so there are a number of drivers that would encourage you to look at sustainability, circular economy, UN Sustainable Development Goals, not least the fact that if you're involved in any public procurement, they will probably give a weighting of around about 5%, maybe even a little bit more, to your policy in that area, and what you're actually doing. Recruitment is another area. Candace was talking earlier about millennials and Gen Z and so on, and there's plenty of research coming forward now to suggest that younger generations are seeking out companies who walk the walk, and they do actually do what they're setting out to do in their corporate social responsibility policy, and they're attracted to companies who do that. And the other thing is, just in terms of targets, if you're looking at things like how to become more sustainable, and people may look at, kind of using recyclable materials and reducing waste and so on. But as a startup, you're in a very good position to build in things to your startup that means that you don't have to reduce because it's already built in as you consciously move towards a more sustainable business. You already choose the packaging that is biodegradable, for instance, or if you're developing a product, it's something that is using materials which are sustainable, and also looking at business models where that a product can be repaired in the future as well. So there's all sorts of things that you can do to build in that sustainability at a very early stage.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that Dawn and I, we've put in many applications for public funding over in our careers, and one of the things that's coming through is not even just environment, but even how you treat your staff.
Yeah.
So Fair Work Scotland, I think, Fair Work policy that basically means that anybody who or any organisation who does work for the government has to say that they pay a living wage. So they don't just pay the basic minimum wage, they pay a better wage bracket, that they treat their staff in a certain regard and give them certain benefits as a standard. So again, it shows that sustainability isn't just in this particular instance about the environment. It really spans various different areas. And if you are looking into that, it's worth having a look at the requirements for these contracts, because that will give you a good steer into what you might want to look into including in some of your applications, or indeed at this stage in some of your operational plans and how you as a business will do things. And it's worth to say as well that obviously the government are aware that not everybody can change overnight, and that's what this has all been about. You can't just change overnight, but showing that you have a commitment to a change can be really powerful. So even creating a statement or a presentation which sits on your website that says, look, hands up, we know we're here, but this is where we want to get to, and this is how we're going to do it. That can be in itself quite powerful for these organizations, because it demonstrates that you're looking to make improvements in your business or in the way that you're doing things from a sustainability perspective. So that's also something to bear in mind as well. I think, have we got any, I wonder if Aisha is coming back in. I don't think she is, but what we'll do is we can move on to the tasks. We don't have very long left. So thinking about change, it's just again an overview of what you need to think about. So think about the resources you might need when you're changing, and think about what you might need to put in. So that could be money, that could be time, as we said, that could be a lot of work to get to the point, a lot of planning, and then think about how you're going to do it. So what strategies you're going to employ. Again, that's part of the resources, what you're going to need to get to that point and how you're going to get there. Then think about your output, so what you're actually delivering. What impact will that have? So what outcome is that going to have on the people that you're dealing with, and the changes, or the organizations, or whatever it might be, what good changes are coming out as a result? And then at the end, you can look at your impactful results and see, okay, this has had an impact here, or this has had significant change or increase or positivity in this particular instance, and you can measure that as your impact. So have a think about that when it comes to coming up with a plan. We've got an activity here that I think we could maybe do for about 10 minutes in breakout rooms. So it's really about thinking about what your end goal might be when it comes to creating an impact. So again, every business will be different. You might not all have the same one. Some of you might want to eventually make an environmental impact change. Some of you might want to make something societal, or any of the sustainable development goals. But what we'd like you to do is to think about what you'd like to do in that particular instance. What thing could you do that might make a great impact in the world? And I should say, it doesn't have to be massive. It can be small. It can be in your local community. But think about what that general goal is. And then think about a couple of the steps that you might need to take to get there, to deliver those outcomes, or the investment you might need to get to that point, and also how you might measure that impact as well. So again, this is just an open discussion around that, kind of quite looking at the future, some goals as well. So what I'll do is, again, I'll open up the breakout rooms just to check that we are actually able to put you into breakout rooms now that I need to go. That's no problem. I can see Jan needs to leave. No problem, Jan. We'll catch you next time. And thank you for joining the session. Right, I will open the breakout rooms just now, and I'll bring you back after 5 minutes, if that's okay, because we're running out of time tonight. in is Robert Gordon University, and we're like, I wonder who that is.
Gosh. So
And he came
bizarre.
to our room.
They're out to
Don't.
get us. There's something they're telling us. The Zoom gods.
Yeah, there's something going on tonight. There's some gremlins, that's for sure. Okay, apologies, guys. We'll just jump back in curious, we're just wanting to keep on to time, of course, so we'll try and whiz through as much as possible. So you probably saw all this, I understand, and I think you were jumping into the set your impact goals. So just a wee word of warning regarding your impact goals and the Body Shop. So this is a recent case study regarding the Body Shop that's going on in the news right now. Unfortunately, it went into administration recently. But it's just really to share that, unfortunately, although you can have the best intentions and your impact goals and your impact piece, sometimes that's not quite enough. And obviously, you still have to adapt with the time. So the Body Shop started off really being ahead of its time with the cruelty against cruelty to animals and the ethical fair trade aspect. But unfortunately, they didn't evolve enough over time in terms of moving their customer. And also a lot more people entered the space like Lush and whatnot. And then became very difficult. Also, another thing the Body Shop did, which wasn't great, was also potentially maybe not the best advised, but selling to L'Oreal, for example, for a huge amount of money. And then it becomes a case of the customers look, the Body Shop customers, and think, oh, potentially you're a sellout. Where's that authenticity piece? It's L'Oreal, great for animal testing and whatnot. So just to say a word of warning about that regards to when you are planning this with your impact goals, just trying to be authentic and look at what's happening in the wider landscape as well, because people are a lot more critical these days and informed. Okay, so I'm not sure if you have time to reflect on that. It's now 18 minutes past. We'll maybe give you a chance to reflect on that amongst yourselves, just for everybody getting away on time. Have a wee think about your impact goals. And like I was saying, a good framework could be, if you're really struggling, is your 17 SDGs Sustainable Development Goals. Okay, so something else to consider when you're planning your impact or how your business is going to make impact as well. For this opportunity, especially with the Accelerator program, is just have a little think about how you can maybe demonstrate the impact piece of your business. So for us as this Accelerator, a lot of the prizes in previous showcases have been things like biggest global impact, biggest regional impact. And this year we're delighted that we have a special sustainability prize, okay, at the showcase as well. So that's maybe something to be cognizant of with regards to this particular program, the Accelerator program, okay. So this is the last breakout room, I believe, and I'm kind of a bit scared for us to go into breakout rooms at this point. I don't know if we're going to come back. But have a little think in this breakout room, and as a final one for the evening, is in your breakout rooms, discuss the economic, environmental, or social impacts that your venture will have. So what resources will you bring into that to make that happen? How can you do things like potentially reduce your negative carbon impact? So if you're dealing with suppliers, for example, can you have that be that your suppliers are maybe not overseas, for example? How can you play around with that in terms of things like your carbon footprint? And what tools can help you do that? And also, can you actually improve the economy beyond Aberdeen? It's great to think about Aberdeen in terms of what impact can you create here, but is there other impacts you could create even further afield, even on a national level? So just 5 minutes for this one. Candace, I don't know if are you all right to set out the breakout rooms?
Yeah, of course. I will do that just now. So I think what we'll do is we will recreate them. There we go. 2 to 3 participants per room, and this one 5 minutes.
Yes, just 5 minutes for this one. Yeah, please.
Perfect.
Thank you. Start off a business without that in mind, and then before you know it, it becomes really difficult to pivot. So it's great that you're doing this now at the outset of your business journey. Okay, so with regards to preparing for the mentor mashup, because that's the next bit here really regarding for, the next big get together, I suppose. And it's something that some of you have been asking me questions about as well, maybe a bit nervous about as well. So it's just to touch on this very lightly. We will discuss this later on in the week as well. But just a reminder, the mentor mashup is on the 27th of March. So that's going to be in about a couple of weeks' time. So please be aware of that. You'll have a note of that already, I'm sure, from previous sessions. But essentially, the mentor mashup is quite relaxed. So we don't want you to panic. We don't want you to worry too much about it. Typically, this is kind of what it can look like. It is quite an informal setting. You'll each have boards that you can display things like your business logo if you've got some, and you'll each have a sign, a business sign for your startup as well. And you'll be able to display things like your business model canvas, for example. Essentially, the mentor mashup is just an opportunity for you to sort of show and share what you've achieved so far in terms of the work you've done regarding your startup, things like your customer discovery or your persona, customer persona, for example. How far your progress have you come along there with your business? And you'll have friendly mentors that you'll be able to speak with, you'll be able to bounce ideas off, and they'll be able to offer you feedback to help develop your businesses and your startups even further. So you can see here, this is Jane John from last year. Yes, speaking with Jeanette Forbes and giving her sort of a run through of what her business, asylum and refugee care was about, which was great last year. And Jane actually went on to be one of our showcase finalists as well. So she was able to pitch on stage, which is great. And you'll see Jeanette is just kind of having a chat with her. Jane's got some business cards there on the table. So if anybody maybe wants to spend some of your funding, I've started to see the funding requests coming through as well. Feel free to print out things like business cards or some other thing that can maybe help you communicate what your startup is about better on the day. That'll be great. It will be from 5:30 till 7:30 on the Wednesday. Okay, and that's the 27th of March. But as you can see, it's quite relaxed, it's quite laid back. So don't panic too much about it, but maybe have a start to think about what can you maybe use to make your stand pop. Okay, how can you communicate clearly the progress you've made as well with your business and your startup? And maybe what are some questions you can maybe start to think about for potential people that you might be speaking with as well? Any guidance? Is there any particular area you need guidance with? Another thing we're going to be doing different this year is we're actually going to have you on stage for a couple of minutes, each speaking a little bit about your business. And that again gives you an opportunity to share with the room what your business is about. So I'd encourage you to start thinking about those value propositions. Okay, how do you communicate concisely what your business is about? Okay, to the room as well. And then hopefully mentors will come and find you as well if they are of interest or interested in your business. So do we have any quick questions there regarding the mentor mashup? Like I say, we'll go into more detail, but this is just a really quick one here, just conscious of time. No, all making sense? Okay, great. Okay, so like I said, there will be more opportunities to ask later on in the week. We'll go into this a bit more detail on Wednesday. Something else to be aware of is preparing for your semi-final pitches. So I was talking about Jane there with AARC and how she actually was lucky enough to be one of our final pitchers as well on stage at the showcase. So how do we decide who basically gets this pitch on stage at the showcase? We have what's known as a semi-final pitching day, and that will be the Saturday. So it'll be just a typical Saturday meetup like we've been doing at the One Tech Hub, except we'll be getting you to pitch. So everybody gets to pitch, and then from there, we'll decide who actually gets to pitch on stage. So I've been encouraging people just start thinking about your pitching just now, start putting it together. As you can see here on the slide, each pitch will be 5 minutes. Okay, so start to put together a 5-minute pitch. And for the semi-final pitching as well, we will have 10 minutes of Q&A afterwards from the EIG team as well, from the judges. So just be prepared for that also. And like I say, all these slides will be made available to you after today's session. So don't worry if you're not able to write everything down there that you see on the screen. You'll be able to catch up after. But essentially what we're looking for in your pitch is telling a story. It's a powerful opening statement, explaining why your idea is innovative, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that is just something to be aware of as well with regards to your semi-final pitching day, and we will be sharing further details on that, but it will be after the mentor mashup, so you've still got a wee while to go for that one.
Sorry, Aisha, Sabina's just sent a message just asking whether you're able to have visuals with your pitch, or is it just talking?
Yeah, so sure, absolutely. So you can have a video or something, Sabina, if you like. Some people did that last year. So as well as you're talking, we can allow not long, I would say maybe 30 seconds or maybe a minute. It's too long to dedicate out your 5-minute pitch, but essentially if you wanted to have a very quick video to back up in your pitch, that's absolutely fine as well. Yeah, we've had that in the past, that's fine. But we want to get to know you in the pitch as well, so please try not to have too much of that time dedicated to that video. Okay, but you can have that as well in the back. Okay, so just general guidance regards to the pitching is 5 minutes, and like I say there, you can see on the slide there, just Sabina's question. Yes, you can use animation, that's fine, video, but keep the focus on your delivery, and consider maybe not everybody pitching. If you have a team of 4 or 5, you might just want to keep it to 1 or 2, and then also be prepared to answer questions regarding the funding, not just the £1,000 that you're all getting, but also any potential showcase funding you might win as well, if you do actually get to be a finalist as well. And you'll need to submit your slides in advance of your pitching session, and this screen shows you, or this slide shows you the dates for that. So again, like I say, all these slides will be available after today's session, so don't worry. But essentially, we're looking for the pitches to be submitted on the 22nd of April to myself, semi-final pitches to take place on the 27th, and then we'll inform finalists on the 29th, and the startup showcase in itself will be the 16th of May. Okay. Well, so that is us, folks. A little bit over, a couple of minutes over, but considering the technical issues we've had tonight, that's probably not too bad, to be fair. So thank you, everybody. My thanks to Candace and Dawn for joining us in this session. Thanks to yourselves as well for making it on a Monday night, especially a dreary Monday night as well. And I saw some of you had some technical difficulties even joining, so at least hopefully the Zoom gremlins will give us a break, and no more issues for the rest of the week, please. That would be great. But does anybody have any questions in terms of today's objectives that we've covered? Like I say, we've covered quite a bit there with regards to impact. We've covered a bit regarding range of scenarios, people, profit, people, and planet, and also the impact goals you might want to set for your business as well, and also covered the pitch. Any questions there before we wrap up?
I think Shiva's got her hand raised.
Yeah, I'm just going to stop sharing. Yeah, go for it,
As
Shiva.
usual, as usual. Aisha, what I was going to ask was for the pitching, is it going to be this Saturday? Or when is it going to be?
No.
Is it on the 22nd of April?
Yes. So this Saturday, we do have you're maybe thinking it's a customer persona canvas that we're going to be pitching on Saturday. So you all have an opportunity to share with the group on Saturday the customer persona canvases you've been working with. But that is just informal. So that's not the main semi-final pitching. Yeah, the semi-final pitching won't be till a wee while away yet. Yeah, we've got the mentor mashup to come first on the 27th, and then we'll have the semi-final pitching after. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, great. Well, if there's no other questions, I'll just kind of wrap things up there. And just from next steps, please do meet with your mentors, continue to do that. I know you've been doing that so far. That's great. And then our next session will be on Wednesday, the 13th of March as well. And that will be on Zoom. Fingers crossed, no Zoom gremlins. It'd be great. Okay, well, thank you so much, everybody. Have a lovely evening. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and I'll see you all soon. Lovely to see you all tonight. Okay. Well done. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you later. Bye.